have to change with it.
Right. And then, like, for instance, when digital point-and-shoot digital cameras got to be very sophisticated, people started shooting a lot of the stuff themselves, doing their own PowerPoint presentations, doing this and that. So I started specializing more into things that they couldn't do themselves, like, for instance, photographing jewelry. It's very difficult, takes a lot of expertise, and you can't just do it with that little point-and-shoot camera. Or architecture, interiors, for instance. Again, a point-and-shoot camera is not going to make it with that little built-in flash. And food and clothing, you know, those sort of things. So that I would go to the things where, because now, when I get a call from a new client, it's always prefaces. We tried to shoot this ourselves.
Right. That's always a good starting point for you, right?
The photographer is always plan B.
Right.
It's never plan A anymore.
We tried it and we couldn't make it happen.
And we couldn't make it happen. So
that's a great opening for you. Great sales, right?
Yeah, I do have a thing. I'm doing a thing on my blog with Plan B.
Yeah.
Is that's the thing, is that a lot of people now, they try it themselves, and then when they realize they can't, and even big corporations, a lot of them were just giving point-and-shoot cameras to their employees and saying, oh, you know, like a salesman, oh, just shoot it yourself. Well, luckily, they realized that the quality that they were getting back was just garbage. They couldn't use the stuff. And I worked for someone who, she does public relations for a lot of the big pharmaceuticals, and she just told them, said, look, you have to go back to hiring a professional photographer. You've got to use Frank for this stuff, because the stuff we're getting is just garbage. Then they have to have a graphic designer spend 2 hours trying to clean it up enough to use it. And so, you know, some of them have now realized that yes, there is still a need for professional photography. I mean, technology is great, but you can only do so much with the technology, especially it's the person behind it that makes the difference. Right.
There's some creativity. I mean, not just some, but there's creativity when you're talking about, you know, planning a shoot and photography in itself. And there's a creative way of capturing things in a way that is appealing, that people can utilize, and it looks professional. And that's what they're hiring from you.
Exactly. And so, desktop publishing in the late 80s is really changed. It was a game changer for the entire industry. Right. Because when people could start designing their own brochures and things, they're not going to then pay a professional photographer to put pictures into it and things. And it has brought the level of quality down tremendously compared to like the stuff in the 70s and 80s where they had huge budgets. Right. And you know, in corporations, they really didn't care a lot of times what it cost to get something done. They wanted it right. And now advertising agencies, where they used to be a large part of our business, they just use stock photography. You know, and a lot of the clients just say to them,
they pay a small amount of money.
Now it's so ridiculously cheap for stock photography, and a lot of them will, you know, their clients will just say to them, only use what you can find in stock photography. They don't want to pay for any original photography. And the only time they do is when it's something that absolutely has to be photographed, like a picture of their building, for instance, or their product. But as far as you see the same stock images come up over and over again. And it's just the nature of the business. So like I said, you have to just keep changing with it. It's a much smaller market than it was 20 years ago. Right. And you have to adjust, you know, cost-wise too. I'm charging less now than I did in the 1980s.
Because of the competition, but the competition is not necessarily another photographer. It's the in-house piece, or it's other people doing it themselves. Right?
It's the people doing it themselves, and they just are not willing to pay what they were years ago, including corporations. Right. I mean, like annual reports years ago were plush with all and gorgeous photography, and they'd send you all over the United States to photograph stuff. And now you look at annual reports and they're boring. They might have 1 or 2 little pictures in it, and the rest of it is just...
And some of them are now, they're emailing it.
Yeah, now they're just emailing.
They're not even sending them out via the mail. You
Yeah.
used to get these nice little things,
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's not happening anymore.
I mean, we used to do some gorgeous annual reports in the
And February,
70s,
wasn't
80s.
it February, like annual report month or something like that, where they got everything together and all the rest stories? I seem to remember that.
Again, you just have to keep changing with the times.
So keeping up and keeping abreast, right, of what's going on. Now, how do you do that? How do you keep abreast of what's going on?
Well, I go to a lot of seminars, both online and live ones. Okay. Read a ton of professional magazines, so I know what's going on.
Keep the education level up.
That sort of thing, and the internet. And the internet has been a big help too, because where they will no longer send us all over the country,
Right.
They won't send people from California out here.
Right.
So I've done very many shoots for people in Europe and in California for companies that will find me on the internet because they're not going to send the photographer like they used to years
Right,
ago
right.
out here to shoot something.
Right.
So it works both ways.
That's good. So before we close up, any last, recommendation? I mean, you've been wonderful in telling people about keeping the training up, making sure you keep up with the technology, keep up what's going on in the industry, keep up what's going on with your marketplace. I mean, you covered quite a bit, which is really, really great. And staying humble. In other words, you're not
Yes.
overextending your budget
Mm-hmm.
and staying within your means, which is great not only for business, but obviously for personal too.
Exactly.
So this way, in these trying times, whatever else the story is, you can survive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, it basically is. It's more survival mode
It
as
is.
opposed to growth mode.
And like I had a lot of clients, especially in the advertising business, advertising agencies, where they would take these lavish vacations, things like that, but then not pay their suppliers for
Right.
6 months.
Right.
And so then what happened with them is that the suppliers were not willing to go the extra mile for them anymore.
Right.
So I always make sure I pay people like immediately, so that way that they're going to jump when you need them. And that makes a big difference.